What is something entirely normal that sounds incredibly racist? In my hometown, a fella named Dr. White opened a chiropractor office that works specifically on patients' necks and related issues. They called themselves White Specific Chiropractic for a few years until they evidently realized how problematic that sounds. Now they are just Specific Chiropractic. Kai grew up with the only black kids in our community, and their last name was Brown. That alone caused a little kinds of awkward situations. But the best is that one of the boys became best friends with a white kid whose last name was not White. When they were like 13, they started a band together and called themselves The Sound of Color. I often wonder how hard they cringe at that now. Kai was at a bar with a sign that said no colors, and I had never seen anything like this. I had to ask the owner what the sign meant, and apparently it refers to motorcycle group colors. I come from an area with a lot of biker groups, so it definitely does make sense. After I saw it, that is a pretty common sign I have been seeing to indicate a friendlier atmosphere for non-bikers. There's this really old bar next to some railroad tracks in a rural town called Clinton, located in Ohio, with a very old, vintage sign on the door that read "No Collareds Allowed." They kept the sign up, I guess, because they thought it was interesting. My very not white-looking friend took me there for the best greasy double bacon cheeseburgers and fries. And the owners were nice. That was about 15 years ago, so I have no idea if the sign is still up. Other language and other area. But yeah, the club I volunteer at had also long had a no colors rule, albeit not posted at the door. There it was about the colors some fraternities, sororities wear to formal events, as well as some other associations, albeit not included in the word. The whole rule also included no political party shirts, slogans, etc., and thus, technically colors if clearly identifiable. Never make a Negroni without using a jigger. I saw one post where people had attacked a Reddit poster, even went into the person's DM to express how tight of a human they were because they used the word niggly, which has multiple meanings, including causing anxiety and discomfort. This enraged people further, but the word has nothing to do with the N-word, but it stems from niggly, stems from niggle, and is its own word with its own origin. There is a valve company called Black Ink. Anyway, at a refinery, with lots of work going on and 2,000 plus additional contractors on site, someone got on the radio and said, "It's well after lunch. If anyone sees those black guys, send them back to work. We are waiting on them." It wasn't half a second before someone else was on the radio in a very calm voice saying, "Black Incorporated team, please head back to the cat fluidic cracking unit. Operations is ready." That's Black Incorporated, please head to the cat. I didn't even realize what was said until the second message. These washing machines are for whites only. It's pretty funny that people categorize clothes into either whites or colored. My mom would always emphasize to me that I shouldn't put a white t-shirt with the colored t-shirt because it'll ruin the appearance. Same with my local laundromat, which has smaller machines dedicated to white clothes and the larger machines for colored. Ever since I learned about Jim Crow laws in middle school, it stayed in my head ever since. Never questioned it. I once described a co-worker who was black as being black by saying short people, dark hair, dark eyes, and dark-skinned when someone asked what she looked like so they could ask her a question, and was told that it was incredibly racist. I was told that I should have left skin color out of the description entirely. When I pointed out that saying short, petite, dark hair, dark eyes described 4 other people working that day, and she was the only one of the 5 who fit that description who was black, they told me I should have let the person asking for her figure it out for themselves. I've heard some racist too. I'm Mexican, but have blue eyes, white skin, my wife is Venezuelan and is pretty light too. I speak English and Spanish. My wife only speaks Spanish. I've gotten so mad at people for stupid comments because my wife doesn't speak English. I worked at a company for about a year where the people there would make racist comments. They were white, Mormon guys, and the comments they made were mind-blowing. for the non-Americans and others who don't live among Latin Americans wondering what's going on. Mexican is in fact the proper way to refer to a person from Mexico or of Mexican descent, or an object or idea originating from Mexico. Racists often call everything Latin American Mexican, not because they specifically hate one Latin American country in particular. That's more of a thing within Latin America, but because they hate Latin America in general and are thus generalizing. In this context, it is being used as a slur. Compare with Chinese for all of East and Southeast Asia, or Paki for all of South Asia. If you live in a place in America that has no Latinos at all, or in a place with only non-Mexican Latinos, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Hondurans, etc., it's likely that the only time you will hear the word Mexican outside of Taco Bell is its use as a slur and other disparaging use. Social conservatives talking about immigration. If you are not a racist, your brain will learn to recognize the word Mexican as a red flag for general anti-Latin bigotry. This would be a useful tool in New Jersey, a state far north of Mexico whose Latino population is more commonly Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans, but far less so in Texas, a state that borders Mexico. Up story is a classic false positive. The coworker probably usually only encounters Mexican as slur, and so she thinks up is being racist. I have two students with the same name, both of which are often troublemakers throughout any part of the building. Whenever an adult in the building tries to let me know, the side hand whisper the one with dark, light skin, I always just tell them it's okay to acknowledge skin color. You just can't say they did the action 'cause of their skin color. Maybe I'm wrong though, and it is racist. To be fair, people could just learn their last names. It isn't that hard, but we have a big school and a lot of stuff. Company I worked for had merger with a company from Mexico. We're based in the US, but our parent company is in the UK. We had folks from both Mexico and the UK meet with us here in the States. I was telling someone about one of the meetings and how a certain phrase was taken differently from each group. I said the American folks thought it meant, the British folks took it as, and the Mexican folks laughed because it meant. It was funny how they got squirmy for the last one. Chiggers, they are an insect that burrows under your skin here in the US southern states that typically hide in Spanish moss. They don't burrow under your skin. The baby chiggers attach and eat a little bit of your skin and fall off, leaving one of the itchiest, longest-lasting insect bites. Usually by the time the itchiness starts, the chigger is gone. Adult chiggers don't bite people at all. They eat the larvae of other insects. They don't burrow under the skin. They attach to the outside and chew at it. You can smother them with just about any cream. Just cover the bite entirely and wait. I recommend anything with mint, eucalyptus, tea tree because of the tingly, clean, soothing feeling. If you aren't precious about it, you can use petroleum jelly, or honey, or wound cleaning gel and a band-aid. Whatever you like. Now scabies. Thosers will dig tunnels into your skin, mate in them, release their vile hell spawn, and continue the torment just because. They don't go away on their own, cause intense, unresolvable itching that lasts up to weeks after the infection is cleared, and are highly contagious. Scabies. I've seen nurses who have years of experience treating patients with horrible conditions, like bowel abscesses, infected wounds, bleeds, etc. recoil in fear and disgust at the mere mention of scabies. These are hardened healthcare workers who have seen it all. If they don't with the bugs, then neither do I. Friend brought his new girlfriend to a party at my house. We were all white people. Somehow a group of us got to talking about the insects. She said, "Where I'm from, Indiana, we call them." No one spoke for an agonizing minute. Friend left with her after everyone ostracized her, and returned later after dumping her. To my knowledge, none of my friends ever spoke about that moment. It was like the moment was just erased completely. I'm in my mid-30s, and a few years ago I was advising a group of recent grads and interns. This is burned into my memory. We were all talking about our weekends, all sort of loud, and several conversations overlapping. I had been camping, and I mentioned that while it was fun that I came back covered in chigger bites. Man, the room just died. They acted like I had just committed a hate crime. None of them had ever heard of the bug before. Later I sent them a link to the wiki article about chiggers in a group chat, and then they let up. Good to see they are so against racial prejudice, but also not so cool that they are so quick to judge without asking for any clarification at all. I live in Cali, and my friend told me about chiggers when he went to Texas. Even showed me the devastation they did on his legs. It's kinda funny how crude the word sounds. If you tell somebody who has no idea what they're OFC, the context in which you discuss it matters to the effect where you usually get someone who goes, "What's that?" But in public, I can definitely see some Karen overhear it and give you a weird eye if they didn't fully catch the conversation. During a text conversation, KKK in Brazil is laughing, or basically, if I remember the Twitter war when us Filipinos were celebrating our Independence Day, so there were tweets about thanking the honorable KKK. It triggered a negative response, calling us white supremacists. But KKK stands for Katastan Kagalangalang Akati Punaning Mga Anaking Bayan, Supreme and Honorable Association of the Children of the Nation, which is a revolutionary group founded against colonists. It was insane. Goof, in 3rd grade I was looking at a globe with my teacher who was black. I saw that country and pronounced it the offensive way. Complete innocently, mind you. I hadn't ever heard the country name pronounced, and I don't think I even knew of the slur at that point. My teacher got visibly upset, but seemed to know it was unintentional and innocent. She corrected me and said it's pronounced Niger. I didn't know what I did, but I knew it made her upset. Sometime later in life I found out and was mortified. It's one of those things I still cringe about once in a while, laying awake at night, and I'm 46. The problem with the first one, not to ignore the point of Op's question, and bask in the technically not racist aspect, is that very few people use it anymore outside of contexts like this. And I'd be willing to bet money that most people who do use it outside of the context of you know what sounds racist but isn't. Do it knowing that it sounds like a slur, and either wanting to get a rise out of people or standing on some principle of I should be able to use this entirely innocuous word even though it has long fallen out of use and sounds incredibly close to probably the most insidious slur in English, which isn't much better. Apparently eating fried chicken and watermelon together. Two delicious foods. Stereotypes are especially weird when you learn more about other cultures and history. Like in Japan, they love frying almost everything, especially chicken. And there's certain customs like fried chicken being a big thing to eat during Christmas, which is like not a thing in any place in America for black people. It's also weird considering there's a whole category of foods black people have popularized that is called soul food, but those are not heavily attached to black stereotypes. I'd have to go look into it again. But from what I remember, the watermelon stereotype is straight up just over-exaggerated because of some photos, images of black people eating watermelons in like post-Civil War America. I remember a long time ago the Young Turks absolutely eviscerated KFC in Australia for an advertisement which an Australian at a cricket match finds himself in a crowd of West Indian cricket fans. To placate the crowd, who seemed to be very happy and enjoying the cricket, the Australian hands out a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. TYD branded this racist because of the racist connotations in the US around fried chicken and African Americans. The fact is that the advertising was developed in Australia for Australian audiences. There is no racial association here between fried chicken and those from the West Indies. TYD doubled down and went even harder instead of issuing an apology. At my last job, I made friends with a black guy. Sometimes we would have lunches provided, and if it was Chick-fil-A he would pass, so I asked why. He said he didn't like chicken because it was stringy. Eventually we also established that he didn't like watermelon. I swear he might have been the first person I'd met that didn't like watermelon. However, I made the mistake of making a remark about this while sitting with him and some other coworkers at lunch. Just nonchalantly making a comment about how weird it was he didn't like chicken or watermelon. He later pointed out that everyone else looked mortified by my comment. I didn't think twice. I still don't understand that stereotype. Apparently the fried chicken thing if Wikipedia is to be trusted, came more from white-toned restaurants using exaggerated, stereotypical caricatures of black people as mascots in conjunction with fried chicken on their menus as some sort of marker of implied high quality, as well as having names like Sambo's and Coon Chicken. Basically, white people commercializing racist depictions of black people and stereotypes. Make of it what you will. But there is a basic history behind it being seen offensively, especially the mascot and design for Coon Chicken. In hell, that there are certain barber shops that it makes no sense for one race or another to go to. I mean to include all hair care facilities. I just don't think about salons too often. I'm a full-blown ginger, but I have very tight curls. 3 for those who care. I've had so many cosmetologists utterly my hair up because it's just not in their wheelhouse. I was in my mid-20s before I ever got a cut that didn't amplify the frizz. I kind of just assumed that was how my hair was. Unfortunately, the woman who did it moved, and no one else in the shop really wanted to touch it. So I decided to take my chances the ladies at the black salon my friend goes to if they'd take a crack at it. Not a problem. And they could sympathize with me that everywhere else I went pretty much just ate it up. In a pinch one time I went into a black barber shop in quite white. I was in the Army's ceremonial unit at the time, and I had to have a fresh haircut every Monday morning. Well, I procrastinated it Sunday afternoon, and we had a high-profile mission the next day. I walked in and asked if they had time for a cut. Several other shops had turned me away. The gentleman looked a little confused but said sure. He proceeded to give me the finest, most detailed fade I have had to this day. He took over an hour going over and over making sure it was perfect, the whole time laughing and joking. It was expensive, but I tipped the hell out of him anyway. I arrived at my unit the next day, and after PT a few of my black friends noticed immediately and asked where I got lined up at. My point is, if you fade your hair, you've got the cash and the time. I highly recommend trying out a black barbershop. I can relate to this. I was once in a mall waiting for my 1-hour eyeglasses to be made, and walked down to a barber shop for a trim. I was told they don't cut white people's hair there. I got it since my sister is a hairstylist, and I knew there are people who specialize in certain types of hair. And this salon had too few white customers to justify someone said with mine. I did not take it as racist, just logistical. But I can see how under other circumstances refusing to cut hair based on race would have played out differently. I remember the oral surgery lesson when the surgeon was talking about bone density, and they said something along the lines of, black people's bone is more dense than white people. An African American student shouted, "You mean African American?" The surgeon was like, "No, I meant black. African American only applies to those in the United States, but they is skin color related. It applies in the USA, South America, or Africa. It affects how you approach a tooth extraction. If you try to pull a tooth out of an African American the same way you do as a Caucasian, the tooth will break." Medical expectations and societal expectations are very different, and the line gets more and more smidged every day. No, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, man or woman, black or white, anything in between. Yes, it matters if you have male, female biology, and your ancestral history can also be a major factor in a lot of medicine. These are not the same thing at all, and so many people don't understand that. There was an episode of House that has a side story about this. Old black dude wants medication, but when the doctor mentions this prescription is specifically for black people, old dude decides he doesn't want it, even though the prescribing doctor is also black. So House sees the patient, tells him he'll prescribe the white medicine, but gives him the black one anyway. So he lied, but did what was best for the patient's health because the old dude was too focused on, oh my god, racism to accept the help he needed. The issue, of course, is that social perception of race does not correspond perfectly with specific genetic risk factors. So it's important that people understand that people with so and so allele are at higher risk, and that allele is more common in the such and such racial population is not the same as if you're black. You have this chance of getting this disease. The problem is people really like to oversimplify and come to incorrect conclusions as a result. When I was pregnant, I had all the blood tests. I am one of those who always asks a lot of questions if I don't know, so went through all the things the nurse was testing for. Got to beta thalassemia, and the nurse said to very white, 100% British me, don't worry, that doesn't affect white people. Imagine my shock when I got a call and my also white husband had to go for blood tests too to make sure he didn't also have it. Wasn't there a weird effort within the medical community to stop that whole conversation because it was castigated as actually racist somehow? Like different racial groups are prone to certain diseases that others aren't. Maybe take it up with the disease and not the people that state the facts then. IIRC, it was in reference originally to findings that black people suffer heart disease at higher rates than non-blacks, or something to that effect. It was 2020 when I heard it, and all the craziness about how racist the research was or something. I don't know, that year was ridiculous in every way possible. If I'm wrong, please correct me on that. It's a bit nuts. My ancestry is very Northern European, and I have factor V laden blood clotting disorder, which means my blood clots very well. Great for not bleeding out from random cuts and scrapes, but very, very bad for avoiding blood clots when you're over 35. This is shockingly prevalent in Caucasians with Northern European ancestry, but nobody talks about it. My family was like, yeah, we have high incidence of heart attacks, but it was all because of this mutation giving us blood clots that dead us in our 40s, but nobody even realized for generations. Reminds me of that one episode of House MD. A patient didn't want to take a specific drug because he'd been told it was developed specifically for black people, calling it a racist drug. Foreman, who is black, tried explaining to the guy that they both are more prone to certain illnesses than whites, and the drug takes that into account, and is more powerful than the other stuff. Patient wouldn't accept the explanation. Dr. House eventually got him to take it by telling the patient they'd give him the same thing they give Republicans. This is why I hate when people say that different races are just skin colors. It's a lot more complicated than that. Some populations may have a higher chance of certain diseases, some diseases may affect different races differently, and much more. Bones are different, skin is different, hair is different, muscles are different, DNA, chromosomes, all very different. And it's not racist to say race A is more prone to disease X than race B, it's just a fact. But a lot of people see it as racist and unethical. I always get a little nervous when people start trying to politicize the field of medicine because, as you mentioned, certain ethnicities are more vulnerable to diseases than others. It's not because of someone's racist rhetoric. That's just how disease is and the human genome works. My dad's side belongs to an ethnicity that is more prone to diabetes, and it should be no surprise that between 1/4 to 1/3 of my family on his side are all diabetics or pre-diabetics. If certain parties opted to remove that from medical texts because it sounded racist or offensive, it would actually put more people at risk because innocent parties wouldn't be aware of the increased likelihood of the disease. If you're fortunate enough to live in a developed country like my dad and me, it's not as big a problem if you're diagnosed. But if you live in an underdeveloped country like most of his family, there are much less options available to properly treat the disease, so prevention is much more important there. Fortunately, knock on wood, it appears most people leave the medicine up to the doctors, which is how it should be. Well, I can speak only on sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia was a genetic mutation to protect against mosquito-carried disease malaria. Defining people at risk is not specifically a race differentiation, but rather regional genetic mutation. So yes, race is a big indication of where your genetic heritage originates, but it's not solely all black people. For one, there are black people who aren't from specifically African descent, but rather Caribbean descent. Not to mention sickle cell anemia is also prevalent among people with Mediterranean heritage, as malaria is prevalent in this region as well. The proper terminology would be to refer to these high-risk population by regional heritage rather than race. The whole race specification is outdated and not fully correct. If it's black, fight back. I've always found this message super problematic. Black bears can be brown, grizzly bears can be black. Following this advice off color will get someone dead. It's all about that hump to rump ratio. If the rump is higher than the hump, it's a black bear. If the hill is higher than the rump, it's a grizzly. Tell a friend, save a life, I like bears. When a black guy in school is asking you to give him the skin-colored pencil, and you're confused which one he means, this is a good one. My mind immediately goes to peach. I'm white, but I definitely called it skin-colored for years as a kid because I really only ever used it to color people. I feel like brown or black were much more commonly used colors, so I think even friends of other races called it the skin color. But that could be confirmation bias, as that was quite a few years ago. Let's make a movie about the most technologically advanced country in the world, but let's have them choose their leader through tribal duels. Do you mean ceremonially? No, I mean that's literally how they choose their government, which is just some basic absolute monarchy. We have the chance to show the most futuristic society ever, but we can't conceive of Africans running their country anyway other than some primitive challenge. I don't know, that just seems like the kind of thing Africans would do.